Hi everyone, welcome to Learn How to Read Music. We are at lesson 6. Can you believe it? It's already been 6 weeks of doing this. What I wanted to do first is just do a really quick recap of all of the lessons that we've done so far, and then move into what we're going to learn about today, which is going to be uh, key progressions and chords and all of that fun stuff. So you should now be looking at the worksheet, or like, the reference sheet that was part of lesson 1. And this is where we understand that music has an alphabet, all of the notes have names, and it kind of follows the alphabet, starting at C, going until A, and then, going to G. So C, D, E, F, G, and then you go back to A, B, C. And that uh, and then it just repeats itself over, and every time you get a C to the next C, that is an octave. Um, this here is what each of the notes looks like in reference to the piano and what it looks like on the sheet of music that you're looking at. So that is the entire 88 key piano represented on this image here. And then every line and space is home to a particular note. You've got the treble clef and then the bass clef. The treble clef is what you play with your right hand. The bass clef is what you play with your left hand. Or the other way of doing it, if with voices, is that your treble clef would be your soprano and alto parts, and then the bass clef would be your tenor and bass parts. So, easy way to remember it, if you're just sort of having a look at just a note on a line, you can just use this quick, simple rhyme to help you remember, is that in the treble clef, the lines follow the pattern of every good boy deserves fruit. And then in the spaces, it spells face, F-A-C-E. In the bass clef, it's similar, but a little bit different. The bass clef lines is good boys deserve fruit always. And in the spaces is all cows eat grass. And then in the next lesson, we learned about the rhythm and the duration. So the two things that we balance in music is the rhythm and the melody. And the rhythm and the melody, you've got the pitch of the notes, and then you've got the length of the notes. And those two things together makes music. So the note lengths, we start with a semibreve or whole note, which you hold for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. A half note or minim is 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you've got a quarter note or a crotchet. Um, just so there's like two sets of names for most things in music. I use semibreve, minim, crotchet, quaver, semiquaver. That's the ones that I learned when I was a kid, and so that's what I just always stick to. But I know that there is another one like that. Just the same way that in the note names, you've also got so far do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do as the other notes names. We won't go there, but it does exist. The crotchets is 1, 2, 3, 4. The quavers is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the semiquavers is 1, 2, 3, 4. And that is how it shows up in the music. That's the things that represent each thing, each note. And then there's another little exercise there where it sort of mixes up the different types of quavers and semiquavers to see how they all go together. But we're just doing a really quick recap. As well as notes having a time value. The rests also have a time value, and a rest is just simply an absence of a note. It means you don't play or you don't sing anything for that particular length of time. And then we've got the time signatures. So this is important, very important to when you're reading the music to understand the rhythm of the of the music. A bar is what happens in between two vertical lines, and then within that bar you have either 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, maybe 6/8. These last two are not very common. You don't come across them very often. They do happen, but yes, normally it's something like this. And so a 3/4 means that there are 3 beats in each bar, and each beat is a quarter of a semibreve, so meaning a crotchet. Uh, Here we've got like a 6/8. A 6/8 means that there are 6 beats in a bar, but each beat is worth a quaver, meaning that there are 8 quavers in a semibreve. So that's the meaning of the top number and the bottom number. Then lesson 4, we've got intervals. We're back to the pitch. Um, and when we have two notes showing up either, at the same time or, from one beat to the next beat, that difference between the two notes is called an interval. So uh, we've got a third, a fourth, a fifth. So, well, sorry, no, you start with like the unison, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, and the eighth is an octave. When we see this in the music that say, we're singing at church, if it's a third or a fifth, and you see them written like this, where one is on top of the other, that means that they are sung or played at the same time. Things like intervals such as the fifth or, sorry, a third or a fifth, they are very common, very, very commonly used for harmonizing. And so you might have that the top note is the soprano part and the bottom note is the alto part. And once you develop an ear for what the melody is, you can then find a third below that to find a really nice harmony. Um, and that will help any singers to be able to hear something and then harmonize with it if they can identify the interval that sort of goes with it. Um, then we talked about the tones and the semitones, where we have uh, where there is a black note, the two white notes on either side are that is a tone because there is a note in between them. When you have, say here, between the E and the F, or between the B and the C, where there is no black key, that is a semitone. And so if you wanted to play a tone above an E, the tone above the E is actually the F sharp. It's two half tones, two semitones. And the reason this is important is because the pattern of tones and semitones, when we come to playing a scale in a particular key, that pattern always remains based on those intervals that we established up here in the intervals and according to that pattern of tones and semitones. Now, with the tones and the semitones and the black keys coming into it now, that's where we use sharps and flats. A sharp is to raise up a semitone. A flat is to go down a semitone. From whatever the white key is on the music staff, if it's a sharp in front of it, it will go up, and if it's a flat, it will go down. If you see a natural, that cancels out a previous sharp or flat. And then this here is a key signature chart that shows how like what sharps belong to each key. So we see G major has an F sharp, D major has an F sharp and a C sharp. And what all of this means, I might just really quickly play for you these keys, these chords, the scales, so that you can see. But before I do that, now I'm going to introduce tonight's lesson, which is this chords and key progressions. So we touched on it last week. We're just talking a bit more about it tonight. So here we have C major in this table, and then the seventh note of that C major scale is B. There are no sharps in C major, it's all white keys. And then the fifth note is G. Why am I telling you this? It's important, it's a pattern. So we take the fifth note, and that is the next one in the progression, G. The seventh note in the G scale is F. And so F becomes a sharp. Let me just quickly stop sharing, and I will show you what that looks like. So C major is all white. But then we go to G major. And we've got the F sharp. Now, the fifth note of G is D. So I'm going to start here. Now, we hold the F sharp from before, but we add in the seventh. Now, the fifth note of D is A. So we go to A next. We hold the C sharp from before and the F sharp from before, and we add in the seventh, which is G sharp. Now, the fifth note of E, of A, is E. So we'll come down here. We keep the F sharp, we keep the G sharp from before, we keep the C sharp, and we add in the seventh note as a sharp, which is D sharp. Now, the fifth note of E is B. We'll do it down here. We keep the C sharp, keep the D sharp from before, and then keep the F sharp, keep the G sharp, and now we're adding in the seventh, which is the A sharp. And then that's all of the sharps used. So now I'll go back to this table. Can you see the pattern? Can you see the pattern? How we started with C, the fifth note is G. We add in the seventh note as a sharp. The fifth note is the next key. Add in, we keep the sharp from before, but we add in the seventh note as another sharp. And on it goes until we get to B major, which has all five sharps, and then it goes to F. And when it goes to F, that's when it comes into flats instead of sharps. So I thought for the first time going through this, we'll just leave it as just the sharps. But now I want to talk to you about chords. We've got broken chords like this. Now, you can see, maybe can I make this a bit bigger? You can see that that is a C, that is an E, and that is a G. 1, 3, 5. Now, these numbers up here is actually referring to the fingers that you would use when you're playing this. But it's also the intervals that these notes are. One to the C to the E is an interval of a third, and the C to the G is an interval of a fifth. Now, this particular one, in the broken chords, um, I'll play it for you in a moment what it sounds like. But then we also that this is the same thing as this, but they're all together as a chord altogether. So we've got the broken chord and then the triads. So this is a root position. So we've got C, this is the triads of C major, where we've got C, E, and G, 1, 3, and 5. Then we take that C, we take it from the bottom and we put it on the top. And now we've got E, G, and going up to the next C. So there's a bit of a gap in between the second and the third note. Then we take the note at the bottom, the E, and we pop it up the top. So now we've got G, C, and E. It's the same notes, but they're just in a different order. And then we return to the root position, but just an octave higher, C, E, and G. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oh, first, the broken chord, C, E, and G, E, G, and C, and then G, C, and E, and then back to the root position, C, E, and G. Now, to play them all together, oh, got it. Okay. Why is this important? Why does this matter? That is because these triads, that interval of the third and the fifth, having that root position, and then it's a very common for harmonizing, and you'll see it quite often in the music that we sing together or that we play. And what happens is when the key changes, like this is all written in C major, and C major is where we start because there's no sharps, there's no flats. But as soon as you start moving up and down to different keys that have sharps or flats, those patterns remain of the third and the fifth. And we follow that pattern still of like the tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And so the reason this helps you in learning to read music is that let's say we need to stop sharing first. And I've caught myself on the chords. Okay, so let's pick a song. Uh, it's been really hard to get this to focus well without getting too close or too blurry. But yes, so this now most of the most of the hymns that we have here are written in soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Um, when there is an interval like that, so that's the sixth, the C to the A. When you're reading music, it's important to understand what that interval should sound like, whether that's the C and the A. Can you hear the difference? Then, I mean, they've messed it up with, we'll look at something straightforward. So we've got a third here. That's an interval of a third. And there you go. So let's say we're reading music for the sake of singing, as opposed to playing the piano. You would be looking at different things when you're playing the piano, but when you're singing, so actually, no, find an easy one. Find an easy one that has something I don't need to explain too much. All right, this one's good. It's in C major because there's no sharps or flats at the beginning. It's 4/4. We've got the treble clef, bass clef, and what we have here is if you are a soprano, you're looking at the top note and you're only looking at the top note. If you're an alto, you're looking at the bottom note in the treble clef and only the bottom note in the treble clef. Tenors would be watching this top note, and then the bass are watching only the bottom note. When this happens and it's the same note, it just means that tenors and bass are singing the same note. Now, I'm saying that you only look at one note, but I know as an alto, I look at that, but I am listening for the sopranos singing the top note because I need to get the interval right. Because, I might have an idea of what that C should sound like, but I know that it would be a fifth below what the sopranos are singing. And so I'm listening for that as well as looking at this. So it sounds like this. Can't really show you the music and the playing at the same time, so we'll, yeah, go with that. With the timing, it's a 4/4, but we've got a note here. We've got the fourth beat as an upbeat. We start singing on the up, and then this, after the two vertical lines, this is where we come in on the downbeat. So when in the wondrous realm above, our Savior had been called upon. So this is why we have this whole concept of hang on, let me just share my screen again. This is why this is relevant to have we've got chords, and when you're seeing that in music, it really helps to know what it is and what it means and why it's there. See this 1, 3, 5. In the music that we're singing at church, you're really only going to see two notes, but knowing what that interval is helps you to be able to know what it's meant to sound like, and especially as an alto, to be able to hear what all the sopranos are singing and find where you fit underneath that. Um, so that is pretty much all I had ready to share with you today. Um, I wonder if there are any questions about any of this. Is there something that I've missed? Is there something that you can't quite wrap your head around because I haven't explained it yet? Is there something that's might seem obvious to me, but if I haven't explained it, I mean, how would you know? Um, so with these lessons, there's we've basically covered the the fundamentals now, but there's a few other lessons to come afterwards, which just builds on these basic fundamentals. And so it means that, there are still some other things to learn and understand about what you see in the music and what it means and how you can use it to either sing or play much better. And if you have an opportunity to get to a piano and become familiar with what the pitch sounds like, um, so that when you hear this, when you hear this being played, to be able to recognize that that is a C, that is a G, that is a B, that is an F. This is all stuff that when I was learning music as a much younger child, part of the um, music exams that I would go to um, included this element of being able to hear and recognize the note and the interval, and I would have to say, "Yep, that's a third." Um, and also being able to recognize what it is that you're hearing, as well as being able to look at the music and know what to play, how to play it, how long to play it. And I know that music, being able to read music, I guess really, I didn't really fully appreciate how powerful and wonderful and what a benefit it has been to my life until I start talking to people who hadn't been taught how to read music and how all these, dots and lines mean nothing to them. And I realized you're missing out on so much if you can't read music. Because just with these simple, dots and lines and squiggles, it means something. And when you learn what it means, there is beautiful music. And that is so special. And it's something that I guess for too long I took for granted. And when I realized that I had taken that for granted so much, that is what inspired me to do these lessons. And so I really want to make sure that you are learning this and that when you look at music, you can understand what's going on. So if there is anything that you don't know, tell me. Leave it as a comment in the YouTube video, or just send me a message, send me an email, whatever it needs to be, and tell me. And I'd be very happy to fill in that gap of knowledge. But thank you. That is all for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.